Welcome to the Tesah Investment Dialogue Series happening live from City Television Studios here at Tesah in Accra. My name is Bernard Avle. We're so happy to have you join us to deliberate on a very important subject in front of a live audience of students from the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration. Please, let's hear from you. Thank you. The Tesah Investment Dialogue Series is a thought leadership platform put together by Tesah Capital Limited, a leading investment financing thought leadership organization, which really wants to give investors clarity on where Ghana's economy is. Today's topic is on getting clarity in the chaos, what lies ahead for the Ghanaian economy. We have a principal presenter, 3 panel members, and we're happy to say students from the GIMPA School of Business and Management who are here with some very difficult questions for my panel. We're happy as well to say we're streaming live on our social media portals. We're on YouTube and Facebook, and we're live on radio as well. If you're listening or watching, you can send in your comments or questions on the stream that's below. I'll tell you who my panel is, and I'll also let you know the plan for the day when we come back. This is the Tesah Investment Dialogue Series 2024. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Tesah Investment Dialogue Series live from City Television with me, Bernard Avle. Today we're looking at getting clarity in the chaos, what lies ahead for the Ghanaian economy. I'm very privileged to say we have Professor Dennis Nsafoah, an assistant professor of economics, Niagara University. He's our principal presenter. He's joining us all the way from North America. Prof is, if you can hear us, give us a wave so we applaud you. Put your hands together for Prof. Wonderful. We have 3 very erudite discussants. In studio is a former MD of the Ghana Stock Exchange and a lawyer, Mr. Ekow Afedzie. Ekow, it's good to see you after a few months. How are you doing?
Not bad at all.
Great to have you here.
Yeah, enjoying my retirement.
Wonderful. You're enjoying it. I've got you out of retirement. We're also privileged to have the MD of Tesah Capital Limited, Mrs. Eugenia Basheer, here with us. Thank you, Madam, for bringing the Tesah Investment Dialogues to City TV. Long may it remain.
We expect so.
Wonderful. And when I have difficult economic questions, I have a good friend I call banking consultant, Dr. Richmond Atuahene is also here with us. As for you never retire, he's coming out of retirement. You don't retire.
I'm in 17 years now.
Amazing.
70 years.
Well done. 70 years.
Yes.
Wow, amazing. So what are we doing today? We're basically trying to understand where the macro economy is. Ghana is in the middle of an IMF program, and one of the big questions we've asked is the economy really turning the corner? To have an IMF program start a year and a half before an election poses a different set of complications, because an IMF program essentially is an austerity program that tries to rationalize expenditure and also raise revenues. So we're trying to address the question of where is Ghana's economy on the basis of some 5 fundamental parameters: GDP, debt to GDP, GDP per capita, inflation rate, and currency stability. So our principal speaker will set the scene by analyzing those factors for us. Later on, Dr. Richmond will also give his own view of the macro fundamentals and where they point us. Then I'll come to our investment people from Tesah and the former GSC to look at what all of these things mean for your investment decisions. 2 other contexts to tell you. There's been a big debt exchange program. Haircuts have been given. So the confidence in the investment market has gone down. Hopefully it's turning. There's also a big one. The president, for the first time in 7 years, has done a major reshuffle. His Minister of Finance, trusted ally, Ken Oforiatta, is no longer Minister of Finance. An economist, Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, is heading the industry. This is the first economist to head the industry, the ministry, since the days of Dr. Akotose. What will this mean for his policy outlook? The City Breakfast Show interviewed him earlier today. He says he's not deviating from the IMF program, and he will promote pro-poor policies. That was his first media interview since his announcement. All of these form the context for what we're discussing today. And of course, students who feel the pinch have been invited here, and they say they have some questions for our panelists and for the rest of us. Let's hear from you with another round of applause, our students. I look forward to engaging you. I'm going to start by going straight to Professor Dennis Nsafoah. Prof, I gave the context. Reshuffle has happened. New Ministry of Finance. everybody thinks the election is going to have a big say on where the economy goes. What are your big highlights for us this morning as the baseline for the discussion? Prof, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Bernard. I would like to thank Tesah Capital, the management of Tesah Capital, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this program. My major highlights from what I studied about the Ghanaian economy is that first I want to acknowledge the fact that the Ghanaian economy has had its own challenges, especially for households and businesses in the last couple of years. However, I have a cautiously optimistic outlook of the Ghanaian economy. I believe that there is hope for 2024-2025. However, this outlook has to be treated with a little bit of caution because there is still significant challenges to the risk of this optimistic outlook. The third thing I would like to also point out is that debt sustainability or debt crisis lies at the heart of Ghana's recent economic crisis. Budget 2024 provides a path by which Ghana can obtain some level of debt sustainability. So these are the three main things that I plan to highlight in my discussion.
Go ahead.
Okay. Given that I get the opportunity to analyze the Ghanaian economy, I want to first set the facts straight. I'm going to use data mainly from the IMF, Ministry of Finance, and then the Bank of Ghana. I'll be throwing a lot of numbers to the Ghanaian public. I have two main models which I generate my numbers from. My first model is a monetary policy analysis and forecast model. It's some sort of an abstraction of the forecast and policy analysis system used by the Bank of Ghana. And then I will discuss those debt sustainability in detail. The model I use is a public debt dynamics tool, which the IMF uses, and is DSA analysis. Okay. Turning to the key macroeconomic variables. In the last 2 years, 2022-2023, the Ghanaian economy has had its own challenges. Key macroeconomic variables have performed poorly or have performed less than one would expect. So if you take a variable like GDP growth rate, the real GDP growth rate in 2022 was 3.1%, and then it decreased to 2.3%, which is less than the 5-year average prior to 2022. It is also less than what I call the long-run targets. Now, these long-run targets that I'm showing are either targets from policy choices or from a forecast model. Typically, these long-run targets are what you expect the variables to be when the economy is operating near its optimum. GDP growth rate, one would expect that if everything is going well for the Ghanaian economy, we should register about 5%. 2022-2023 was way less than 5%. Another variable Ghanaians like to discuss, especially in the news media, is the cedi depreciation. 2022, the cedi depreciated by 30%. 2023, the cedi depreciated by about 27.8%. All these values are way higher than what we recorded 5 years prior to 2022-2023. And it's also significantly less than what one would expect the cedi to depreciate at when the economy is operating near optimum. This 6% is mainly coming from policy choices. Ghana has an inflation target of 8%. The US has an inflation target of 2%. Theory suggests that if both economies are operating near optimum, expected depreciation rate should be the difference between those two inflation targets. So that's where I got my 6%. What is my outlook for the Ghanaian economy? Like I earlier indicated, I expect these key macroeconomic variables going into 2024-2025 to stabilize, if not improve. I don't expect them to reach their long-run targets, but I expect significant improvements. So for example, I expect GDP growth rate to increase in 2024 by about 2.8% and then 4.4% in 2025. I expect the cedi to depreciate, but not as high as it did in 2023. I expect a depreciation rate of 14 and then 18%. Okay. These outlooks or these The outlook or the forecast I'm presenting is founded on some perception that I have about the Ghanaian economy. And one of those key prime perceptions are what I think will be the path of public debt to GDP ratio. So I would discuss public debt to GDP ratio since I have quite a good outlook of public debt to GDP ratio. Currently, Ghana's total debt stands at about 563 billion Ghana cedis. That accounts for about 93.3% of GDP. This value is what we last recorded in 2022. 2023 figure is not officially out yet, but we forecast that the public debt will slightly increase to about 589 billion cedis by the end of 2023. And that would be debt to GDP ratio of 69%. At this state, Ghana's debt is deemed unsustainable. That's why we went for the IMF program, and that's why we've had all these austerity measures. For the purposes of my analysis, which I'm going to show, I would define debt sustainability as a public debt to GDP ratio of 60%. One would ask, why are you not using the advertised 55%? The 55% that the government has advertised is the present value of debt to GDP ratio. I'm using nominal value. So under simplifying assumptions, one can easily say a nominal debt to GDP ratio target of 60% is equivalent to the 55% advertised by the government. Okay. My question, or my major question, which I would answer in this presentation, is how Budget 2024 has addressed the issue of debt sustainability. In Budget 2024, the government highlighted some policies, including the domestic debt exchange. So in my baseline scenario, I consider all the policies highlighted in the Budget 2024, but I exclude the ongoing external debt restructuring. When I consider the government policies, I forecast or I project the path of public debt to GDP ratio. And the forecast indicates that we still fail or we fall short of our target, even by 2027. And that's a big challenge. Why am I optimistic then? There is a path by which we can meet our target, and that path is the external debt restructuring. Currently, the government is negotiating about $10.5 billion worth of debt relief. In my analysis, I don't use a relief worth $10.5 billion. I define success as the government being able to achieve 80% of that target. So if the government can achieve 80%, then we can achieve the target of 60% debt to GDP ratio. So 60%, 80% of the external debt relief would really enhance debt sustainability in Ghana, or it would retain public debt to sustainable path. Since I see a path by which debt returns to sustainable levels, I want to go into details to explain how the government or the strategies the government is using to achieve this debt sustainability, and then also share my views on those strategies. There are four main strategies the government is using to achieve this path of debt sustainability. The first is more borrowing. The second is restructuring our current debt. The third is pursuing fiscal consolidation. And then the fourth, which I'll talk a lot more about, is monetizing the debt by issuing more cedis to inflate away the debt. The first strategy, more borrowing. This, in my opinion, is the second most sustainable way to manage fiscal debt. Unfortunately, Ghana lost access to international debt market or international capital market late 2021. And as a result, the government has been restricted to borrowing from domestic market, specifically using treasury bills. In 2023, approximately 50 billion cedis was raised through the money market, which covers about 68% of government financing needs. I expect borrowing from the treasury market to continue in 2024 and 2025. However, I still believe that the government can successfully secure the funds they need from the treasury bill market. Mainly because of two reasons. Ghanaians have a strong demand for treasury bills, and then the debt sustainability, the domestic debt exchange did not cover the treasury bill market. So there is some level of confidence in the treasury bill market. That's why it can serve as a successful means for the government to keep financing its operations. The second, debt restructuring. A lot has been said about debt restructuring. The domestic debt restructuring is projected to yield about $8 billion worth of debt relief. The government is also in negotiation to get about $10.5 billion in external debt relief. What's my view of these debt restructuring? I think, as I earlier indicated in my debt sustainability analysis, relief from external debt plays a crucial factor to secure the path of debt sustainability. I dare say that without relief from this external debt, there's no way we can achieve debt sustainability. And then the third, which ideally should be the strategy every government should use to finance its debt, fiscal consolidation. Fiscal consolidation often comes in two forms, either reducing government spending or increasing government revenue. Budget 2024 tells us that the government is actually pursuing fiscal consolidation, but it is sort of skewed. One would realize from the budget that the government is maintaining expenditure as a fraction of debt to GDP ratio across the entire forecast horizon. Expenditure as a fraction of GDP in 2023 is about 21.5%, and we expect it to remain consistent and later fall to about 20.5%. However, if we look at the revenue side, the other side of the equation, we see quite a significant upward trend. The government is looking for ways to raise revenues. I'm not saying it's a bad strategy. We have heard all the different revenue measures the government has put across. It is great. However, I believe that a better approach to ensuring fiscal consolidation would have been a more balanced approach. Reduce government spending a little bit whilst you enhance or whilst you increase the revenue side of the equation. The fourth approach, which I think has not been spoken a lot on, is how the government has inflated the debt away. We all know what Bank of Ghana has done for the fiscal authorities, or the role the Bank of Ghana has played since the government lost access to international debt market. Bank of Ghana in 2022, 2023 financed fiscal spending. It's estimated that between those 2 years, Bank of Ghana financed about 100 billion Ghana cedis worth of the deficit. In as much as that is key, I personally believe the largest contribution of Bank of Ghana in the path where I see fiscal debt sustainability is the role inflation has played. Okay. Now let's look at the numbers. Public debt to GDP ratio in 2022 is 93.3%. We expect it to be about 69% in 2023. Nominal public debt is 56.7 billion Ghana cedi. 2023, we are expecting it to increase slightly, 589.4 billion Ghana cedi. All right, so the numerator is not changing as much. However, the denominator, which is nominal GDP, 2022 is 610 billion Ghana cedi. 2023, we are expecting a nominal GDP of 850 billion Ghana cedi. Well, that is approximately 40% increase in GDP growth rate. All things being equal, this should be celebrated, right? In regular times, you should celebrate a GDP growth rate of 40%, but not in this case. It turns out that real GDP growth is roughly 2.3% of that value. The remaining value, that is about 37%, is coming from the GDP deflator. Now, GDP deflator may not be a common variable discussed in news media in Ghana, but it is some price level we use GDP deflator to measure inflation. Okay. That means that inflation is anticipated to decrease the public debt to GDP ratio by 23 percentage points, right? So with inflation, we have just wiped off our debt. This strategy we're expecting to continue because the government is projecting another nominal GDP of about 1 trillion mark. I know it's been talked about where the GDP hits 1 trillion. Yeah, GDP is going to hit 1 trillion, but a large component of that growth is from inflation. My personal view is that monetizing the debt has been the most effective way the government has achieved, or the government has set public debt into sustainable path. However, in my opinion, it is the most harmful strategy to households and businesses, particularly affecting low-income groups due to the way monetary policy works. It disproportionately affects low-income groups. I haven't had time to actually study in detail the effect of this episode of inflation on Ghanaian households and businesses. This year, that is something I would really love to do. I see the benefit of this inflation. The benefit of this inflation is that we are set on a path of debt sustainability. But at what cost? How is this going to affect Ghanaian businesses, and how is this going to affect Ghanaian households? I think it's going to be extremely harmful. It's not going to be desirable, and I would really love to know the direct impact to actually tell if it was worth it, the benefit of achieving debt sustainability, if it was worth the cost that the inflation is going to do to Ghanaian households and businesses. Now let me answer the question. Has the economy turned the corner? The finance minister named 2024 budget as Nkunim budget, and I think the finance minister had every right to name that. The budget in Nkunim. He was right when he said he sees that the economy has turned the corner. In my opinion, by reading budget 2024, I saw a path by which fiscal authorities can return public debt to sustainable levels. That is victory on its own. So I say, indeed, budget 2024 was victory for the fiscal authorities. But the real question is it really victory for Ghanaian households and businesses? Well, I doubt that. The reason I doubt that is Ghanaian households and businesses have and will continue to pay a huge price for this victory that fiscal authorities are going to see. Next issue, let's talk about Bank of Ghana. Bank of Ghana has played a pivotal role in steering public debt towards sustainable trajectories. However, central bank's success is not measured by its ability to return public debt to sustainable levels. Central bank's measure of success is by its mandate of price stability. Price stability, in my opinion, is very essential for macroeconomic stability. For every economy like the Ghanaian economy, price stability is the bedrock of the economy. Bank of Ghana officially adopted inflation targeting regime in 2022. By that, they defined an inflation target of CPI inflation of between 6 to 10%. My question in this section is, how has Bank of Ghana actually performed in fulfilling its mandate since it adopted the inflation targeting regime? Bank of Ghana's mandate, remember, it's not a debt metrics. It is to ensure that inflation is in target. So I analyzed inflation data from 1982 to 2023. Inflation targeting was adopted in 2002. Since inflation targeting was adopted, one could see that there has been some level of stability in the path of inflation. I'm not saying this is purely because of the inflation targeting, but we have to acknowledge that inflation has been relatively more stable since we adopted inflation targeting. But how has inflation performed with respect to the target Bank of Ghana has set for themselves? In that regard, I would say we have had modest success. Of the 260 months since we started inflation targeting, we have only been able to achieve an inflation within the target band about 54% of the time. That is roughly 21%. 21% success rate, in my opinion, is just modest. What then should we do? I think after 20 years of practicing inflation targeting and the fact that we've seen modest success, this is time for Bank of Ghana to critically review their price stability mandate. Bank of Ghana should actually review their price. The MPP government in 2002 switched from monetary aggregate targeting to inflation targeting because they felt that we could not hit the target of monetary growth which we were set for ourselves. So the reason why we switched from one regime to another regime was because we were not observing the target we set for ourselves. Well, after 20 years, we have not been hitting the target too. So we have to critically analyze the regime and then possibly consider alternatives. There are tons of alternatives that the Bank of Ghana can consider. They can consider raising the inflation target. They can consider reducing the inflation target. They can even switch to target nominal GDP. They can adopt what the US does, a dual mandate, or they can go back to the old way of conducting price stability, which is monetary aggregate targeting. Another option available to them is to keep what they have, maintain the status quo. But if they are keeping what they have to go back to basics. They have to make sure that they fulfill all the prerequisites needed for an inflation targeting regime to be successful, which is maintaining central bank independence, eliminating fiscal dominance, which we don't see in the Ghanaian economy. But I think that wherever the incoming government is, price stability mandate of Bank of Ghana is something they have to critically analyze and review. Okay. I would end my discussion by talking about elections outcomes and macroeconomic performance. Since we are in an election year, it is only right for us to talk about elections. To do this, I take 5 main macroeconomic variables: real GDP growth, real GDP per capita growth rate, the average inflation rate, public debt to GDP ratio, and then the exchange rate, or the rate at which the cedi has depreciated. A common sentiment often suggests that economic performance of the country is contingent on who is at the helm of affairs. Does the NPP perform, or does an MPP-led administration perform better than an NDC-led administration in terms of economic outlook or in terms of economic performance? Well, this should no longer be anecdotal evidence. We have enough data from 1992 to actually empirically provide support for whatever our perception is. So I did just that. I analyzed the data for these 5 variables, depending on who was in charge of the administration. And then my overarching conclusion is that I find insufficient evidence to support the claim that one party economic performance is superior to another party's economic performance. The details are, when we consider real GDP growth rate, there was no statistically significant difference between the NPP and the NDC. Per capita growth rate, no statistical significant difference. Average inflation, no statistical difference. Public debt to GDP ratio, no statistical difference. Where the only variable I saw a statistically significant difference was the cedi depreciation rate. And it turns out that in the years in which NPP has been at the helm of affairs, the cedi has actually performed better than in the years in which the NDC had been at the helm of affairs. But regardless, this does not conclusively support the fact that one party has been superior compared to another party. All right. Thank you very much, and I think I was within time.
This is the Tesah Investment Dialogue Series happening live from CTTV studios here in Tesah. Tesah, very related. We just had a fantastic presentation from Professor Nsafoah from the Niagara University, Assistant Professor of Economics. I don't know if you're applauding, but that was amazing. Put your hands together for him one more time. Very solid baseline in terms of looking at review of the Ghanaian economy, the economic outlook, looking at debt sustainability, analyzing that quite thoroughly, looking at the government's 4 approaches to try to achieve this, looking at the Bank of Ghana's mandate, and then in an election year, comparing the records of the 2 political parties. I want to ask you a couple of questions, and I think maybe the panel will have a few questions for you, just to clarify before we go into our own presentations or comments. So, Prof, this was fantastic. I wonder why you use debt to GDP in your calculations of debt sustainability, because we do know that GDP is really not liquidity, right? So we're talking about debt to income. So you're looking at maybe debt to tax revenue or debt to your export earnings. Why did you choose to use the debt to GDP figure in your analysis? That will be question number 1. Maybe if you can deal with that first, because I also have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can deal with that now, yes.
All right, good question. Debt to GDP ratio is not the only indicator of a government's ability to pay its debts. All the other variables that you have said can be used. But as an economist, usually you want to take the broadest variable whenever you want to choose just one variable, right? If you want to analyze other variables, then you could include them. But if you want to have the broadest picture, you go to the broadest variable. And whenever you're analyzing debt to GDP, debt sustainability or debt sustainability analysis, the broadest variable you could find, which encompasses every other smaller variable, is public debt to GDP ratio. And that's why I picked it. I could have complemented public debt to GDP ratio with all the other variables, but we are trying to optimize.
The reason I come to that question is, in the 4 strategies the government used to deal with the debt, more borrowing, the debt exchange, fiscal consolidation, and then inflating away the debt. The problem with debt to GDP is the 4th point, right? Because if you're trying to inflate away the debt, what your inflation does is that your nominal GDP rises higher than your nominal public debt. So it gives a false sense of security. So whilst I don't criticize debt to GDP, I feel like one of the most insightful things you've said has been the fact that government has been trying to inflate away the debt. And therein lies the problem of debt to GDP, because then that presents a wrong picture, which is why you said, even though he says he's turned the corner on paper, individual consumers and businesses cannot feel it because it's just a paper change. So I want to push back to you and say, your point number 4 and the government approach reveals the flaw in debt to GDP.
That's correct. I also have to correct that I did not mean that was the intention of the government. All right. I have no evidence to substantiate that was the intention of the government. But whatever variable you use, you would still see evidence of that. Let's take, for example, we're taking interest payment to revenue ratio, which is another variable we could use. Because revenue is a function of GDP, nominal GDP, you can also see a big spike in revenue. If you read budget 2024, you would notice that 2023 revenue increased significantly, about 30%, which is an excellent performance, all things being equal. However, that 30% increase is also because of price levels increasing. Okay, so whichever indicator that we could have used, we would have seen elements of the price effect. So you can't actually do away with the price effect. And creditors, the variable they look out for is debt to GDP ratio. I dare say in the next debt sustainability analysis the IMF would do, we would have Ghana's debts being assessed as moderately risked, meaning that we'll see an improvement. And it is because of all these factors. It is a strategy economists use. It has its flaws, but it's the best we have.
Fair enough. Two other questions before I come to my other people. The government has resorted to treasury bills, and you said that their first strategy is more borrowing. And you said it's been the second most effective. I want to believe that you are using the word effective in terms of saying that it worked for them. Not effective as in it will work for all of us. Because
yes,
treasury bills are short-term instruments, and the possibility of it long-term worsening inflation and crowding out private sector are so serious. So I want you to explain what you mean by Treasury bill strategy is effective, because I don't think they are effective. It's effective.
I agree with you. In my analysis, I played the role of assessing fiscal strategy. Fiscal strategy here is to ensure that public debt returns to sustainable path. So when I first said inflation was the most effective, what I actually meant was that it was a strategy by which we can see a significant decline of the debt to GDP ratio. That's what I meant. I did not mean it was good for households and businesses.
Just a last point. You said the fiscal consolidation is skewed because it looks like the government is determined to maintain a certain expenditure without revenue rising. So you said on average the expenditure to GDP will be about 21, 22%, but revenue doesn't even reach 20. I just wanted your thoughts, a bit of elaboration on that. Because don't forget that every election year, we've had budget deficits except 2004. IMF is aware of an election year and gave us some targets. If government intends to spend more than it raises in an election year, that is quite problematic, is it not? And what's your comment on that?
Yeah, it is. My outlook, I couldn't have time to explain a little bit more in detail, but whatever number I threw out there has a significant risk to it. One of the risks is political instability. Another risk is the government actually going off course, right? It is very possible that the government could go off course, and when the government goes off course, whatever I have said would not be realistic. It's a challenge, it's a risk, however, which has to be managed by the government.
Fantastic. I have a question on inflation target, but I'll come to that later. Let me take Dr. Richmond Atuahene's comment, but I want us to give a round of applause to Professor Nsafoah, because Prof, it's not very easy to make economics easy, right? Pardon the pun, but I think you made it very. And I also like the way you differentiate between what is success for the government or the fiscal authorities and what is success for businesses and people. I think that's a very important point, because even in our conversation as media, we always transpose what government says about what is good for the economy for what is good for people. But I think your analysis is very careful in differentiating that, and I need to commend you for that. So I really appreciate that. Dr. Atuahene, any initial comments on what he said before you enter your own thoughts?
My own comments, which I didn't see clear, was that the government's ability to cut expenditure. I mean, we talk about fiscal consolidation. I mean, we cannot go with 86 ministers, so many people, and as the household are tightening their belt, some people, and now people have even been appointed to the Ministry of State, adding already to the bigger ministry. I mean, I'm told the finance minister is going to be a chief economic advisor. I mean, look, debt sustainability is not only about the debt management of it. At times, you need to do expenditure cuts. I mean, we need to cut the level of expenditure on these ministries and MDAs, so many people. And what is happening is that we are telling the household, Ghana, that is happening. So, Prof, I think that area, you people should be talking about it clearly, because it is so sad that poverty is, and the World Bank report recently, more people have moved into the poverty levels. And people are driving V8 as if. And there are so many of them. So, Professor, I think maybe you are far off, so you don't see what I see. It is one area that I cannot and I will never ever understand. America don't have 60 ministers. England, I was in England recently. We don't have so many ministers. What's all these people doing? I mean, some of them don't even do anything. And they have assistants, they have PAs. Recently, I came and I saw the vice president's office. The numbers are more than even people working in this place. What sort of economy is this? People should be learned to tighten their belts. I mean, they are not tightening their belts. They are only telling us that GDP and GDP. When I do my submission, you will see that it is contrary to what is happening. The reality on the ground is that we are being made to tighten our belts. And people are just losing their belt.
So that's your first comment on, and I need to say that he did actually point out that the expenditure
Should be cut to the
target
barest
was
minimum.
not ambitious enough. So what I'm saying is that you're on the same page. You're using different approach to saying it, but he said the same thing. He did say that 20% expenditure to GDP is too high, and he thinks that the government could have been a bit tighter. So that's your first point. What's your substantive point on the question of what lies ahead for the Ghanaian economy? Don't forget, his main thesis is that we can be cautiously optimistic, right? I think his main point is that key indicators will do better next year, but there are risks that we have to address if those positives will not be eroded. That's his basic premise.
Well, if you want me to add my voice to what he has said it all. But I have 5 critical areas.
Okay.
Very important areas. You know, there's the clarity in kiosk. I believe that the kiosk is still with us. There are no clarity in it. And I'm going to list 5 areas.
Okay.
And I want everybody to listen. You cannot go forward when you have a debt overhang. Current debt overhang from the IPP is $2.6 billion. How are you treating it? The kiosk is still there. And I would have preferred that in the course of the GDP, this debt with IPP or the international the power producers should have been dealt with. Because it's an albatross. It is an albatross. And if the light doesn't come in, all professors have said, the GDPs, the GDPs and all those things will be thrown overboard. If light should be cut off. But you see, you can't say you have cleared a road when you have this albatross on your head. That is the first one. You know, when Prof was talking about, he talked about it is effective to borrow from the market. That is the worst policy. When you were paying bond 19%, you couldn't pay. Now you're buying treasury bills at 30%. What sort of mathematics and calculation is that? When you were lending at 19%, you said you couldn't do it. You restructure it and pay. Currently, I'm told the bond is trading at 8.35%, not even 9.1. There's no activity there. And then if you cannot pay your bonds, why do you begin to accumulate the short-term debt? And what you have done is that those investors are here. Do you know what is going to happen to you? The inverted yield curve, what we call the inverted yield curve, whenever the short-term yield is higher than the long-term, and that, according to professor will tell you, we are heading towards recession. That is what the literature has said. Anytime economy has more short-term debts, higher yields than long-term, the economy is heading. Financed people, that is what it is. So you cannot tell me.
Sorry, can you restate that point? You're saying that if short-term
debts are getting you 30%, and the long-term debt is giving you 9%.
Because the normal yield curve,
yes,
the longer term, more
that's right.
The return. So what we are doing with giving more money for T-bills and longer term, shorter, is we have inverted the yield curve.
Exactly.
And that is a danger sign for the economy.
They will tell you, the finance people will tell you, a complete literature says that you are heading for economic recession.
So that's your second point.
Yes.
Your first point is about the restructuring and
the second one, the third one comes with the clouding out. I heard Professor saying that, you know, the governor said recently that credit to the private sector has declined in real terms by 10%. Because government is just like a snake. This snake, I don't know his name. He only swallow. He's just only taking the money. What does he take the money for? Let the private sector have cheaper funds to turn the economy. That is why all the GDPs, or you're talking about the economy, the stability and everything will come. But you see, if the government is borrowing and they cannot compete, the private sector compete, then we are crowding out the business. And it's a very dangerous thing. There will be no recovery. And if the economy doesn't recover, unemployment will be very high. There will be no job creation. We're only talking about figures, what the IMF is telling us. But the reality is that there are so many unemployment and non-job creation in the country at the moment. So for me, the way out, I found it quite incredible. Now, another one that comes in. whenever we're talking about these politics, Bernard, what we have factored, those of you in risk, geopolitics, the current geopolitics in oil at Hamas. If you remember, in 2008, we bought an oil, Mr. President Kufuor time, 147 per barrel. This morning, when I checked the oil, it is now going to 85. And nobody seems to understand that with all these things going to happen, all the inflation, the GDP will be thrown overboard. And that what is very close to us, Bernard, very close to us, the exit of the Burkina Fasos, the Nigers and the Mali, should they stop producing tomatoes for us? What is this GDP we are talking about? What is this inflation? Food inflation will go high. Ridiculous. I won't miss West. Because you see, if these people decide which one?
So sorry, your fourth point was on food inflation.
Food inflation.
Food inflation.
Concerning
and ECOWAS.
the oil, not only the ECOWAS. President Kufuor time, 2008, a barrel of oil was 147 per barrel. Go and check. If we should go there, what are the other contingencies have we made it for? And that will throw the inflation out of gear.
Yeah.
It will throw everything. Now, the last one. What Prof said that there's another area, Bernard, which is so sad. I have done a publication. I put it in the Journal of Social Sciences. It's being published now. Look, once upon remittances. As I speak to you, check Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Jordan. The economy depends on inward remittances. Do you know what has happened to us? 2019, the Payment Service Act 987, and the National Platform for Payment System came in. We have deregulated, and some institutions are holding on to foreign currency as against the Foreign Exchange Act 206723. And I find it quite incredible. The World Bank said, last 2022, Ghana was expected to have received 4.7. Do you know go and check, it's only 2.1 billion came to Ghana.
Let's get it straight. You're saying that the
remittances to the
inward
country,
remittances of 4.7 that we were supposed
that
to
is
have
what the
on
World
paper,
Bank said. Yeah.
only 2.1 came because the companies in the chain.
Go and check from the auditor.
So what do? They retain the forex or use it to do business? What do they do?
Some of them are retaining the forex. It is only those that goes to the authorized dealer banks that comes into the economy. If we were to have received that 4.7, I don't think the cedi depreciation would, because it would be far more exceedingly even above the IMF 3 billion. 2.6, I'm saying it with confidence.
So let me just understand this. A company, I want to send money to my relative in Ghana, and I want to send maybe $100.
Yes.
That $100 doesn't really get to my mother.
No.
Because the intermediate company
Will
gives
get
them
the dollar.
cedis,
Yeah, give a cedi.
but takes the dollar and then holds it offshore.
Offshore.
So the economy of Ghana does not benefit from $100. So even though on paper we have 4.7 billion,
we're only getting 2.1.
and is the governor and the Bank of Ghana aware of this?
It is in the Bank of Ghana. It is in the Bank of Ghana statement. I pick it from the statement from Bank of Ghana. Consistently, I've done it from 2016 to 2023. And I find it incredible.
So if they wanted to boost our reserves, they would deal with that gap
that alone.
Allowing these companies, and are these Ghanaian companies, by the way?
Some of them are some, I wouldn't want you to mention their name.
But they are foreign companies.
They are so powerful, yes.
So they hold on to foreign currency.
I tell you.
And the central bank is unable to deal with this.
They are not,
and even though they are breaking the law.
they are breaking the Foreign Exchange Act.
That's interesting. So that's a good pointer for the Bank of Ghana people watching the show.
I have said this, I've made this publication. They have tried to call me, and I've told them that. I did the job based on my picking the Auditor General signed report of Bank of Ghana. I did it over 7 years.
And this has been the trend.
It has been the trend since 2019 when the act came in.
Since 2019.
Since 2019, you can quote me anywhere. Payment Service Act 987.
It has led to less dollar reserves.
Yeah, exactly. And the people are benefiting.
Well, this is the Tesah Economic Dialogue series coming to you live from City TV studio in Tesah. We're before a live audience. Are you guys excited? I can feel you. Put your hands together. Wow. Very soon I'll turn to you for your comments. These are business students from Gimpa Business School. We still have to hear from our investment panelists. So I have the economic panelists and I have the investment panelists. I have heard from Professor Nsafoah, and I've also heard from Dr. Richmond Atuahene. I just wanted to come to the audience briefly. If you have any questions for them before I go into the investment side. I had so many questions. So we're going to send a couple of mics to you, and you can mention your name or a comment, right? It seems as if Richmond is fired up. We should have brought somebody from Ministry of Finance or BOG here. Because Nsafoah is just doing his analysis as an economist, and you are a finance guy doing your analysis as well, and we appreciate both. Can I take a first round of comments? Yes, so it's a lead in front here at the Tesah Investment Dialogue. What's your name? What's your comment or question?
Yes, Sarah Boateng, and my question goes to Prof. Nsafoah. I think I got excited with the last slide on the politics. I think the government, the various regimes, and the outlook on the Ghana's economy, and realized that most of the differences wasn't significant, except the cedi depreciation bit. So then the question is, we don't have any better option, but should we be looking forward to build our economy? Then what should economists be doing to advise those who should be coming to the next office, since we are in an election year, to get something better for this country, to make the right selection or the right choice?
Thank you. Prof, can I take 2 or 3 questions so that it's easier to manage? Are there any more comments or questions from the floor? From my Gimpa students? Okay, maybe let's, Prof, deal with the first question first. Okay. I hope you got the question, yes?
Yeah, I did. That slide was the slide I least wanted to talk about. That's what got people excited. What should incoming governments do? My personal opinion is that Ghana's economic problem is not first world problems, if I can say that. It's not complex, right? We have basic economic issues where solutions that solve these problems abound, right? Fiscal consolidation, trying to manage our expenditure, trying to build the structure of the economy. How do you grow an economy? How do you improve standard of living? Productivity, measures that improve productivity. How much an individual worker can produce. If the government can invest in the things that enhances productivity, that's what grows an economy in the long term. So if we channel our structural policies to policies that enhances productivity, definitely we can overcome our low standard of living parameters that we have in Ghana. In the short term, there are also things the government can do. The government needs to actually treat its debt crisis. And then I have discussed some of the issues that the government can do to improve their sustainability. But overall, Ghana or the incoming government should dedicate policies and resources to things that improve productivity.
I have a follow-up question. I take issue with the... Of course, you did analysis of government, and it's very risky, right? You said debt to GDP, GDP per capita, GDP itself, and then I think you did inflation, and then currency depreciation. And on currency depreciation, you said there's a NPP has done better than NDC statistics. Is this also not from the point of view of the authorities versus the consumer? Because when I took a mortgage in the early Kufuor years, right, the dollar was around 1.2. By the time I finished paying the mortgage December last year, it was at least close to 13, 12 something. At some point, it went above 14. So from a consumer perspective, if somebody started paying a mortgage when Akufo-Addo took over, 3.4 to the dollar, and it's now gone to 12. If you compare that to what he was paying from even Mills to Mahama, do you understand what I'm saying? So statistics
can... Yeah, I get you.
If I move from maybe 1.8 to 3.4 versus I move from 3.4 to 12, you can't come and tell me that on the basis of percentages, the MPP has done better. Do you get my logic? Because
I get your logic.
So you need to separate the percentage from the real effect. Because if I'm paying $400 in Ghana cedis in 2017, I'm paying times 4 of that in 2023. So if you tell me that, and Kufuor was 1.2. So your data on the, what do you call it, the exchange rate.
And unfortunately, but when you are analyzing exchange rates, you need a common denominator. Depending on what time period it is. If you want to generate a more comparable analysis, the only realistic way you can compare one time period to another time period is to use the percentage changes.
Which is
I get where you're coming from, and that is a real problem. That is a challenge to that analysis. But if you want to make real comparative analysis, I can only use
but you admit that the point you made earlier about turning the corner and what the fiscal authorities will say versus effect on incomes, households, and businesses can translate to all the 5 parameters, because on paper you can say the two governments are very similar, but there are always contextual issues around the time we are in. For example, the debt exchange occurred at a time where the currency was falling as well, and COVID had not yet fully gone. So if you use all those 3 effects together from 2022 to 2023, people will say they've been very badly hit as compared to, say, the doomsday years, where apart from the doomsday, you don't have all those things happening at the same time. So I'm just saying that economic analysis should also take cognizance of the real context and
the theory.
You understand what I'm saying?
I get you. I get you.
Anyway.
I get you. And I also expect that we put context to it. And that's why I didn't take it as far as to establish causality. Right.
So just a correlation. Fair enough. Any more comments from the floor? Yes, sir. We have a gentleman from UPSA. Sorry, Gimpa Business School. Tell us your name and let's hear your comment.
So I'm Charles Anane Bayamfui. I think I want to side with the panel who just spoke about one of the worst policy we can, go for is constant borrowing from the foreign market. So I want to find out what are the institutions doing in helping government to raise, say, capital, or what are the institutions doing in helping government to raise revenues? I want to cite an example my dad told me. He lives in Canada. That when when the government construct road from, say, Accra to Tamale, within 1 year, the police in Canada will raise more than what the government used to construct the road for the government. But here lies the case in our country, and they are not doing it in illegal way, but in the right way, because we have offenders on our roads, most especially in this country. We've got the most offenders on our road as far as the drivers and other things are concerned. But we go to borrow money as a country, come and pay the same, institutions, let me use the police, come and pay the police. And this police, when probably they get the offenders on the road, they take the money back into their pockets. It doesn't go back to the government. So I think there are avenues that the government can use to raise more money instead of constant borrowing on the foreign market. So I think we should also look at that angle. And I would suggest subsequently we bring someone from the government to come and sit in.
And also come and answer questions.
Exactly.
Thank you. We appreciate your comment. This is not really a question, it's a comment. We'll take another one from the back. And it's 12 o'clock. This is the Tesah Investment Dialogue. We're going to move into the investment leg of the conversation shortly. But please tell us your name and your question. Please speak up. Speak up.
My name is Derek Glover. I would want to ask, when Prof spoke, he spoke about the government strategy in managing debt. And he spoke about fiscal consolidation. But it seems he had a problem with the government being so dependent on increasing revenue, revenue only as the measure of fiscal consolidation in managing debt. I don't know why he has a problem with that. And then also, I would want to ask, how does fiscal authorities benefiting from the 2024 budget, calling it a victory, and how does it affect the nation? If it's a victory to the fiscal authorities and it doesn't benefit the household and businesses, how is that a benefit or how is that a victory if you're not all enjoying it?
Prof, those questions are for you, if you can attempt to answer them.
Well, first, I don't have a problem with the government trying to raise revenue. I was only advocating for a more balanced approach to fiscal consolidation. I think raising revenue is a good strategy, but if you skew fiscal consolidation only towards the revenue side, what you do is that you tend to demand more from households and businesses. But if you make it more balanced, then you give them a little bit relief. Because remember, revenue is just taxes, right? Yeah. So I don't have a problem with raising revenue. I was only advocating for a more balanced approach. The second question, I think I missed it.
I think he was just reiterating the point how we can say that the minister is entitled to say we've turned the corner as a fiscal authority when it does not reflect in the pockets of people or the businesses are not feeling it. He's wondering why we can say that they are justified in saying they've turned the corner.
Yeah, government finances were extremely challenged 2 years ago, 2022, 2023. So if you are the Minister of Finance, you see an economic crisis, and at the heart of that economic crisis is public debt crisis, right? How they would interpret that as a victory is, if I can solve the public debt crisis, I have set up the foundation to solve the problems that households and businesses deal with. So that can be something we can build on to relieve households and businesses. What I'm saying is households and businesses are not feeling that effect yet. But the fiscal authorities can call it a victory because, in their opinion, they have set up the foundation to build upon.
Wonderful. Let's put our hands together for Prof. Yes. Yeah, Richmond has a question, after which I'll turn my attention to my other panelists. Yes.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Bernard. There is something I don't understand. Recently, I think yesterday when I came back, PwC has said categorically that businesses are moving away to Togo and Nigeria because of the nature of the tax system we have. And I want to share this experience. I came and my granddaughter told me, Grandpa, I want the sachet Milo. When you get to Ghana, buy me some. I can't believe the taxes. I bought the whole box of Milo, 400. And then I even took half, so 200. I took it to DHL. Tax 1, compounded tax 2, compounded tax 3, tax 4, tax 5, tax 6. By the time I got the Milo from Ghana to something 200, with a freight of 200, I paid extra 700. Look, how would you do business? And I feel it. I felt it. The young man is here. He did it. I couldn't believe it. So, are you taxing to kill industry? Recently, Mr. Bwaji, the Ghana Chamber of Commerce, he said that businesses are almost gone now. He said it. I'm not saying it. He said business, because of the tax nature, you can achieve your tax, but what will be the consequences on local industry? And we have to be careful that if we don't take care, time will come. There will be no local production in the country. And we won't then depend on the imports. And this what Prof was talking about, currency depreciation. I think we're going to have a terrible currency depreciation this year.
Yeah. So you're asking whether tax mobilization should be done at the expense of the survival of businesses.
That is it.
That's a legitimate question for all of us.
Very, very important.
And I'm not sure Prof is advocating that. I think it's a good question you're asking for all of us.
In Canada, where he is, it is not like that. It is not like that. Even Nigeria, which have been there, it's not like that. Because you see, we are not trying to let people come out to do what they want to do, all because that you said a tax. But do you see people who are not employed? All these beautiful human beings here, the next 5 years they are there, there are no jobs. You go to the embassies, Bernard, you go to the embassies, the worst thing you see, the number of Ghanaians, oh Jesus Christ. trying to go out. Everybody wants to go out because the environment is not enabling for even survival, let alone to build a future. You said you took a mortgage, and I bet you today you can't just take any mortgage in this country because the way the city and the depreciation is going, by the time you take a mortgage, it's going to be about 17, 20%, 20 cities. All these things should come into it, not taxes achieving. If you want to achieve tax, as I told Prof, there is the need for fiscal consolidation by reducing expenditure. I didn't see that yesterday. I wanted to see 60 ministers.
Wonderful.
60 ministers. After all, Mr. Mahama is saying, and your party man is saying 60. Somebody, your friend, Alan, your friend you interviewed, he said 40. So they all know that we can manage this country with 40, and we are managing with 100. What sort of country is this? God save us.
We like the fire we are getting from our guests. I want to turn my attention to Mr. Ekow Afedzie. And Ekow, you are the former MD of the Ghana Stock Exchange. I know that the exchange has been there to try to galvanize resources for the country, you know, and maybe talk to us about alternative sources of money, all right, raising funds, because it looks like there aren't enough places to go to, and whether the exchange, in your view, has been performing its role well as that place. We are talking about businesses, right? Businesses need money. Debt may not be the best idea. Are they going to the market? Is the alternative market working? Are people interested in buying stocks? What will that do to revive the economy? What's the outlook? So if you can just give some general thoughts on that before I come to Madam Basheer from Tesah. So put your hands up for Mr. Ekow Afedzie.
Thanks so much, Bernard. And I like the fireworks coming from Doc, and Prof is very calm and cool.
Yeah.
and Prof's presentation was very solid and very impressive. And I like his conclusion about being cautiously optimistic about the future. And to me, as Ghanaians, we must believe in the future. If we don't believe in the future ourselves, I don't know how we're going to get there. So it's very important that we believe in the future and believe we can do it, that we'll make it. That's very, very important. And that relates to investments, if you look at it generally. What Prof talked about in terms of the economy is one of the major factors that normally will impact on investments. So you look at inflation, you look at interest rates, you look at the foreign exchange, they all impact on the markets and the investment space. So it's very important to have stable macroeconomic environment, have an improving economy, whether it's inflation, which is 23.2 now, we can achieve the targets being set. Is it 15.8 or so, 8 plus 1 or is it plus 2 or minus 2 by the central bank, 15 by IMF. If we can achieve that, that will go a very long way to help the markets. Same as currency, if we can come to some stability and also the depreciation reduces a little or more to the level where we want to get to, then that will also help. So the economy generally impacts on the market. Then the other things that impact on the market, which was looked at critically, and I had Doc talk about it in a way. You know, sometimes people don't look at it, but when you're dealing with corporate instruments, like shares or corporate bonds, the performance of the companies themselves is also key, in addition to what's happening to the economy. So if you're not getting the companies performing, then you have an issue to, with attracting investors and even attracting capital that you are talking about. Performance of these entities are very, very key. The third point there, which most people don't really look at, is the market itself, the market structure or the infrastructure. Do we have liquidity? That's very important for investors, both local and foreigners. Do you have liquidity in your market? How easy it is to assess your market? Are you automated, using technology, etc.? They all play a major role, but most people don't really look at it. Then investor knowledge. I heard you all talking about treasury bills and all that. Prof was talking about Ghanaians like treasury bills. They're more inclined towards that. It's all because of the fact that apart from high interest rates, they know that, even if it's discounted, they look at it from the interest rate angle. I'll get 20-something% at the end of the day, etc. Are people very knowledgeable about the other investments we have? Okay. And those are the times that can really help the economy to grow. There's no country that has really developed with dependence on T-bills or short-term. We must always have long-term view and have long-term instruments. And that's the only way we can develop this economy. So these are some of the key factors that affect the investor, the investment space, and also markets. And the last one I'll mention, political environment, key. If we want markets to grow, we want to attract investments, political environment is very key. And all these will go to build the investor confidence. Without investor confidence, you're not going to get the markets move. So what do we see now, and also looking into the future? Currently, we have a debt market. We also have the equity markets. When you take the debt market, most people look at it from the bond market. Ghana, we set out a bond market in 2015 called the Ghana Fixed Income Market. It's been one of the most successful markets ever developed in this country. From 2015, where we traded about 55 billion, all the way to 2022, where we traded 230 billion. Then when we had all the DDEP and all that coming in, we had the liquidity dropping. So in 2023, we had the market doing only about 98 billion. Okay, so that is how the market has been impacted. But then, I'm beginning to see, looking to the future, especially what is happening, or what has happened in January and also beginning of February. It's getting more liquid. We've traded about 14 billion within 1 month, which is about 48% higher than that of last year. So we can see the signs of growth again there. If the economic environment will improve, then we are likely to see a lot more. And if we can get T-bill rates coming down, then we can also get people shifting a lot more to the bond side, because that is what we need. Okay, so apart from the government bonds, we have corporates, and that is where we need to get our companies to also look at the corporate debt. So there's bank borrowing, and interestingly, for those who have been following the market, we just had Kasapre who do bond issue at 26%, a 3-year bond, raise 100 million. They only raise about 600 million and so on. But the point I want to make is that corporate bond is another area, and we have about 35 issuances on the market as we speak, coming from about 7 companies. So that's another area. T-bills, we've talked a lot about that. But going forward, the market is looking at commercial paper. We're looking at green bonds, so that we can have various products in the market to attract different kinds of investors. I decided to talk about the debt market because that's what most people are interested in. The equity space is more difficult. Exchange is set up in 1990, over 30 years old. We still have just about 36 companies listed, ordinary shares, just one preference shares, and then some depository shares. The key thing is that, how do we grow this market? How do we attract more listings on this market? And the only way that can happen is also dependent on what happens to the economy. If people see that you can get the higher returns from equity, and the economic theory will tell you the higher the risk you take, the more you should be getting. But then, like Prof said, we have an inverted yield curve where people are getting a lot more from even shorter instruments than that. So that is the area that we need to really build on. And to me, the people running the exchange are doing a good job. They're moving around, talking to companies, hoping once the economy picks up, we're going to get some
Wonderful.
Some companies coming up there. But in terms of performance, last year was not bad at all. The market went up by 28% in terms of the index compared to negative the previous year. So that's a sign of improvement also on the market, although liquidity was lower, but it's beginning to pick up again. So in summary, let me say, we do have markets, we do have the investment space, the economy has impacted on that, but to me, there's a future, there's the potential growth coming up. And also, we are seeing some of the macroeconomic indicators gradually coming down, and that can impact on the market. So this is the time to invest.
Thank you, Ekow Afedzie. I have a couple of questions for you, but I just want to announce, yes. I want to announce that this is the Tesah Investment Dialogue. We're live on City Television here at Tesah. Picking our first investment comment from Ekow Afedzie, former MD of the exchange. We'll be back with another question for him, and then I'll come to my other guest. Don't go away, stay with us.
Tesah Capital, your gateway to smart investments. For over a decade, we have been your trusted fund manager. Regulated by SEC and registered with the NPRA, we provide investment advisory and fund management services to pension trustees, institutions, and individuals. We bring innovative and research-driven investments to your doorstep. Because at Tesah Capital, you're more than just a client, you're family. Tesah Capital, grow your wealth.
Welcome back to the Tesah Investment Dialogue series. We're live here at the City TV studios in Tesah. Please put your hands together. We've been here for an hour and a few minutes. My guests include Professor Nsafoah, Assistant Professor of Economics, Niagara University, who gave us a baseline presentation on the economy, analyzing economic outlook, debt sustainability, inflation targeting, and also the effects of an election year. We also have Ekow Afedzie, a lawyer who's the former MD of GSE. We had also Dr. Richmond Atuahene, a banking and investment consultant, financial consultant. And I have, of course, the MD of Tesah Capital, who have brought us all together, Mrs. Eugenia Basheer. We'll be hearing from you shortly. My question for you, we're all told government is the safest place to put your money prior to domestic debt exchange. We put our money in things, you were giving principal haircuts. There was also lengthening of tenors and reduction in interest. Some people think the good thing there is people will look for investment in more meaningful things. So they put more money in companies as well. So now it's not just buying government paper, but you can now think about supporting a great company, watch them grow and exit. Is there any positive in the debt exchange and what it did for the way we've been so skewed in our investment choices, Ekow Afedzie?
I'm sure you learned in school that the safest investment is normally government bonds, right? But where you have the situation where interest rates are always very high, then better be careful about the risk that it introduces into the system. So the good thing about what has happened is the fact that interest rates have been cut as to whether in the long run we'll be able to match it with inflation also coming down and the treasury rates also coming down. That'll be fine. Because you can't be having interest rates of over 20% longer term. We're going to be generating the funds you pay. It doesn't work that way anywhere. When you take most countries around that are developing, the interest rates are streaming on the low side. And that is why it's very, very important to also look at the inflation and all the underlying economic indicators Prof talked about and also Doc talked about. So the good thing, like I said, is the fact that we are streamlining the interest rates regime going forward. And also, it will surprise you that apart from the fact that most people lost a lot of money because of the rates coming down and also and all that, people are still investing. People are still investing in some of these collective investment schemes that put their money in there. Fine. The market is not as liquid as before. But going forward, as the spread is going to pick up, I believe there's going to pick up seriously. Then also, in the long run, if we're able to get, like I said earlier on, all the macroeconomic indicators coming down, then we will now be able to do longer-term instruments. And that is when you also find more people going to the equity side. And that is when you also find corporates also doing longer-term debt instruments, 10 years, 20 years, and all that. So we need that to help the economy to grow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Afedzie. Please put your hands together for him one more time. I want to sort of prelude your comments with two things. He says cautiously optimistic. Do you agree? He says people are still investing. Is that true? What are your comments?
Okay, thank you very much, Bernard. And I've enjoyed the discussion so far, very insightful. And so the economists have said their bit. How does it affect me and my investors, my clients? And so I agree, cautiously optimistic, because once again, I'm going to borrow from the economists. They keep saying all things being equal. Exactly. So we've heard what the budget is saying, and I think that's the premise Prof was coming from. So we're looking at what the government is intending to implement, and therefore what is the effect on investors, and how should we invest? I picked a few things from what he said. First of all, he suggested that Bank of Ghana may have to move away from their inflation targeting approach, but they haven't. What we have, and from what you said from your discussions with the new finance minister, it looks like he's going to follow this path. So what we are going to have is inflation targeting. So I ask myself, how does that affect investments and investors? As long as we keep targeting inflation, it means that interest rates are going to remain relatively high. A lot of us were surprised when we saw that the policy rates did not was not reduced as much as we were expecting. But it looks like they had seen more of what was in the pot. They knew that inflation is still sticky. If we look at what came out recently, it went up slightly from 23.2 to I think 23.6 from 5. So they know that inflation is still sticky. So it means that Bank of Ghana is going to continue targeting inflation. What does that mean? It means we are going to see treasury bills still being on the market at these high interest rates. The question we keep getting investors asking us that, is there going to be a haircut on treasury bills? And I keep telling them it's a question I cannot answer. Because you cannot rightly predict or essentially predict what the government is going to do. You may use all your economic variables. Dennis is a member of our research committee at Tesah. I remember somewhere early 2022, if you remember, I called him and I said, Dennis, I'm worried about the government debt. What is happening? What do we do? He said, give me a few minutes, I'll call you back. He called me and he said, Eugenia, do you want the truth or you want me to massage it? Dennis, I don't know if you remember this conversation. I said, give me the truth. He said the debt levels are unsustainable. So we're having the conversation. I said, Dennis, what are we going to do? He said, well, the only clear path I see is an IMF program. It's inevitable. An IMF program happened. However, in that conversation, we did not anticipate haircuts and restructuring, and especially to these levels. In that conversation, we spoke about possible restructuring of the Eurobond. But we were not expecting domestic. Now, why am I saying this? Similarly, we may look at all the variables, and I'll point out to another one and say that T-bills is not likely government to touch T-bills. Why? Because if you look at the budget, and you look at how government is intending to fund their expenses, it's T-bills. T-bills is plan A, T-bills is plan B, T-bills is plan Z. So it will be suicidal for them to touch what is going to be their lifeblood, at least for the next 12 months.
Good.
So based on that, we can comfortably say that we don't expect that there's going to be any restructuring in T-bills. And so for the short term, it looks like we're going to see these high rates on T-bills. What is the effect on that? Mr. Afedzie was just saying it, and I think he came out. It's crowding out everybody else. Because once again, we are seeing huge oversubscription in T-bills. And that's why Dennis is saying Ghanaians like T-bills. And so everybody is once again going to give their money back to government. And what's happening to industry? Where do industries get money from to grow? So that when they're on the stock exchange, they're churning out the sort of returns that will make it attractive. So that when you're telling people about stocks, sometimes you're talking to people about stocks, and you are able to get their interest, then the next year you see the market dives, and then all the talk, people come to you and say, you said I should buy stocks. Look at what is happening to the stock market. And it's difficult to explain to people that it's a long-term, so look at the long-term outlook. At the end of the day, they are looking for a return. So there are effects to what is happening in terms of for investors. So yes, we can all continue to run to T-bills, but what is the long-term effect for the economy? I'll tie in with the effect of the DDP. So we have restructured, and there have been hard lessons. Investors have had a raw deal. Investors have lost their money. People's lifestyles have been so negatively affected. Maybe I'm so passionate about it because I get to meet them one-on-one, so I know what investors are going through. In spite of that, we've learned lessons, and it is forcing us to innovate. We all got comfortable. We all ran into treasury bills, government paper, government bonds, because we all thought it was safe. These days, I say it cautiously, relatively risk-free. Exactly, so relatively. And now what is happening is we are all being forced to look at what the alternatives are. So I'm talking to investors more about the stock market. And we are being forced as investment advisors or analysts and fund managers to come out with products that are alternatives to government paper. So for example, we are seeing a bit more corporate debt on the market. As Ekow said, Kasapeko has come to the market to raise money. We've had more interest in debt issuances by companies, by corporates like Bayport, Eastway, and the likes. And the interesting thing is that you find that these companies are actually borrowing at rates that are lower than government. They're supposed risk-free government. Kasapeko came to the market at 28. Bayport came to the market and borrowed at 21. Exactly. So it's telling you that there's even more confidence in these corporates than in government. For investors. So these are some of the key things. There are a few things on inflation and things, but I'm sure it will come.
Ekow, any comment on that?
Yes.
No, come on.
You know, when I ended up saying that people are still investing, you reacted to it. But she ended up that way. The reason why I said that is that we're accumulating a lot of pension funds in this country. And they need to invest. And that is why we need to create more products for them. Some of them also got their fingers bent, all right. But then you see increasingly pension funds getting into the equity space. I think they're doing close to maybe 50% or more now, unlike in the past. When you take the corporate debt that is being issued, you find a lot of pension funds getting in there. So there are these institutional investors around who are also looking for avenues to invest because they're getting funds and they must invest those funds. The individuals who are also making some money, they're not the people who want to run business or establish a factory or something, not to invest in financial instruments. So that will continue to happen. But then it will also depend on what happens to the general economy going forward.
Wonderful. Prof, I have a question for you on the strategy the Bank of Ghana used. I think the third point had to do with the debt exchange. The initial one was the domestic debt exchange. The bigger one is the foreign debt issue, which hasn't been fully dealt with. In retrospect, do you think they should have done the foreign first? Because it appears the domestic has affected people's confidence in the market. I know it's easier said than done, right? Just what are your, and what kind of challenge would they face? Don't forget there's the bilaterals, there's the commercial Eurobond and all of those things as well. So where do you see this going? Because they haven't actually come to a full deal, if you know what I'm talking about.
Personally, I would have loved that the only sort of debt that would have been structured or restructured was external debt. But unfortunately, domestic debt is a low-hanging fruit. If you're a government, you want to go where you can easily have access, build that confidence to approach the more challenging task of renegotiating with external creditors. For a consumer, for a Ghanaian, for an investor who invests in domestic bonds, it's not good for me. Will I have done anything different if I was in the finance minister's shoe? I don't think so. You would go for the low-hanging fruit, and I think that's what they did. Going forward, from what we read coming from the Ministry of Finance, it seems they have made headway. A lot of people are optimistic that they can be successful in getting some sort of deal from external creditors. For my analysis, I define success as anything 80%. They got 90% participation rates in the domestic debt exchange or in the domestic restructuring. If they get even 80% participation rate in the external restructuring, that to me would be a success. And the signals we get is that they can achieve that.
Two key sectors of interest: energy sector, cocoa sector. You mentioned, Richmond, about the power, what do you call it, energy sector and the power producers and the challenges. The cocoa sector has also struggled. We've had the lowest cocoa output in 13 years. We've had the highest interest rate on the syndicated loan in 2 decades. And we've had the swollen shoot disease decimating cocoa. Although cocoa futures, the price of cocoa, have gone up. I just wanted general thoughts on that. I mean, cocoa price being good is good for the country. Because anytime Ghana's economy tanks, you have gold prices and cocoa prices collapsing. So cocoa prices are high because of the bad weather. It's good. But somehow you're not able to produce enough. So what are your thoughts on what cocoa particularly means for the outlook? I'll take Doc first and I'll come to Prof and then those of you inside.
Fortunately, my mother bequeathed to us 100 acres of cocoa in Kasem, Kwame Krom. And fortunately, I visited the place in 2022, and I made this prediction on your sister station, Peace FM. You can go there. I said, we're going to have a serious challenge in cocoa production. Because even my own one, I wanted to sell it to Newmont so that I could have taken my money and exited. Because a lot of investment has not been done in cocoa. Look, Kufuor time, President Kufuor time, I drove there and there was a road from Nkasem to Kwame Krom, 15 kilometers, where Yabobo could carry the cocoa. When I went there, the road has completely kaput. People have to carry the loads. Confidor, they were expected, Kufuor time, we give 15 Confidor for the farm people to praise it. When I went there, there was only 1 bottle. So when I came, I went to one of the radio stations and I was saying, somebody sitting there, you know, these political animals at Cocoa Board. When I said that Ghana cocoa is going to drop, they started hunting me. I say, will you wait and see? Recently when I came, they told me. And it's going to drop further because we have not invested in it. That's why when you go, people are even selling the land for galamsey. Because it is a quick time return. Unfortunately, the returns that go to the farmers are so peanuts. They are the most poor people in Ghana because I have a farm. So that if you don't invest in, you're not going to. President Kufuor invested. That is why President Mahama was able to secure 2 billion, one of the syndication.
Yeah.
Because at that time they have done infrastructure for the cocoa and the. Unfortunately, since this period, I asked the guy who was looking at it, they gave me 1 bottle of Confidor. And the road, when I talk it on the radio at Peace FM, the next day they send Caterpillar to go and straighten the road.
Interesting.
I can't believe it. They say I'm too passionate because I am a Ghanaian. If you don't invest in, you don't get. The better we begin to invest in them so that they can have a return, equitable return, the better. Because you're talking of futures of $5,200, isn't it? Yesterday, 5,204. Look, if you even harvest 1 million tons, you are making 5.4 billion, which is far more exceedingly above the IMF loan.
Yeah. Just from cocoa.
Just from cocoa.
So the production is a key part.
It's
now that we have a good price.
Then let us go to gold. At Kimpiski recently, I made a statement before I left. You know, one minister said, I don't want him to mention, he knows himself. He said Ghana benefited 6.6. When I went to the Bank of Ghana report, we got $865 million, less than 13%. And then I told them that, go to Botswana. Botswana used to have diamond. Those of you know Botswana, diamonds. It is mined by DBS, Anglo DBA. They were facing the same challenge with diamonds. And they said, hey, leave the diamond die for us. If we are going to get 10%, let's just renegotiate. You know, this year, they're getting 30%. Next year, they're getting 50%. Unfortunately, you take somebody, explore the land, destroy the land, and you're only giving 13%, and you want to clap. That's why we say lithium or what. When I heard a lithium story, I thought it's a joke. Somebody taking the resources, and they know what they do with the resources. Immediately, Botswana has agreed. Today, this year, 30. Next year, 40. Let's assume you do for 6.6 billion, and you get 40%. Is it not 2-point-something billion? Wouldn't you support their currency? So, not that I'm too passionate about that. People say I like the figures. I work with figures. I research into it, and I speak to it. So, until we begin to realize that this country is the only country we belong, and we must be selfless, not to think about our own parochial interest. The problem we have is that everybody thinks about his own, but not thinking about the generation after me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Doc. Let me take a final comment on cocoa and gold from Prof, and then I'll open the floor for our final round of questions. This is the Tesah Investment Dialogue. Clarity in the chaos. What lies ahead for the Ghanaian economy? I have panelists in here on investment, on economy. Prof, did cocoa feature in your analysis at all? You did mention about the power sector. Just a quick comment on cocoa.
Cocoa and gold still remains very dominant forces in the Ghanaian economy. As you rightly mentioned, we are experiencing favorable terms of trade. Prices of these traditional commodities are increasing. But the output, remember, it's the revenue you care about. Revenue is price times quantity. We are not really seeing the decline in output because the price is covering for the decline in output. And also we have oil, which now is covering for our lack of productivity in these two sectors. But this is not sustainable. Prices, you can't build a sustainable economic growth with price level growth. It is only when we see increased productivity in terms of quantity output, right? So I agree that we need to take a critical look at cocoa and agriculture in general in Ghana, right? Wonderful. It is time we invest there, become more productive, and not only be reliant on hope that prices of these goods and services would go up.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you very much. A couple of comments coming in online. Mohammed Abubakar Sadiq in Tamale. Good morning to you and your guests and viewers. I'm very glad that you are having a chat on investment. Question is on investment in open mining in Ghana, which are owned by Ghanaians. Which Ghanaians are involved? Are they MPP or NDC? how can we get more benefit from Ghanaians? I think it's talking about mining and the nationality of the mining companies. Benedict Baganea, I tune in late, but all the same, let your panel educate me on how we can diversify the Ghanaian economy to lead to increased competitiveness on the global stage. I think that's an interesting question. There's also a question on pension funds. How can we unlock them to drive more growth in the economy? I think you hinted about that. If you can elaborate, that would be nice. So I think the question about mining, I think the talk about nationality of the mining company. And then the second question was on competitiveness from diversification. And then there's a question about unlocking pension funds as the next frontier. Mrs. Eugenia, pension funds, what are your thoughts on that?
The first time I saw the Pension Act before it was passed into law, I thought that, yes, this is going to drive growth in Ghana. Because when you look at other economies, that is what has happened. We see pension funds from other economies, even in Africa, coming into Ghana to invest in ventures here because they've grown the pension funds to the extent that they can invest outside their country. Today we have pension funds of over 30 billion. Where is this sitting? Unfortunately, I'm sure 70 to 80% is sitting in government paper. There are different sides to this. Do you blame the investors or the pension fund holders for investing in these instruments? Not necessarily. We were all running to safety. Government is safe. If you have a safe instrument that is giving you over 20%, at that time inflation was lower, so you are beating inflation, it means you are getting real return. There was really no incentive to find other avenues. So that is where, when I say that there have been positives to this DDP, this is where it comes in. So now pension funds are beginning to look for alternatives. And this is where I expected to see pension funds driving growth in the economy. I haven't seen the statistics, but I'm sure if you look at the Kasapeku issuance, I'm sure a large chunk of it will be from pension funds. Most of the investments you're seeing outside government issuances, you find that is pension funds. And as fund managers, the pension fund trustees keep tasking us. What are the alternatives? What else can I invest in? So recently we've seen a REIT, a real estate investment trust, come to the market to be able to raise funds to purchase a real estate property here in Airport City. And you find that a lot of pension funds invested in it. So it's up to us now to take advantage and create the investment instrument. And I'm sure you see a few coming up over the next few months. I know there are more REITs coming up, there are debt funds coming up. So this is what will go to build the economy. And it's important. That's why I am not too much of an advocate for pension funds being allowed to invest outside. I may not be popular for saying this, but we need to use the funds to develop our economy.
Wonderful.
Before we start looking at taking pension funds outside.
Thank you, Ekow.
You know, I brought up this discussion on pension funds before even this discussion came up about the fact that what are they doing with the money? They need to find investments, and that is why I like what Eugenia was talking about. We need to diversify the products so that we can get these funds moving in there. Pension funds have led or driven the growth of so many economies, and it can be in most sectors. And I think recently, if you take MPRA, I think they took a second look at the areas where they could invest, and I think they've come up with other alternatives apart from just the government and the equity, etc. So if you can get them to diversify into various sectors, that'll be fine. But then, you know, the pension fund managers and those who invest also rely on those who are really contributing to those funds in order to take certain decisions. So sometimes when you're in, like you take City FM, you're investing and you have a trustee and you have and all that, you find now that the trustees will tell you it is Bernard and Kwe who are telling him that don't put the money in equity. because they don't know what they're going to get in equity. So they also are very tight. But the DTP we need to make sure we can get pension funds to get into various sectors in the economy so that we can grow the economy.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Let's take a final round of comments from the audience. Please, are there any comments or questions based on where we are going? Please introduce yourself and let's go straight to you.
I'm Joshua. I have two comments, one to Doc and one to Mr. Afedzie. Doc, when you go through all the textbooks, the cons, it prefers solutions to all the things that bring our economy up. You listen to the political discourse, all the flag bearers prefer solutions to our economy, but it seems we never see any of this materialize. Is it that our economy has been bewitched that no textbook can prefer solutions to us, or all the solutions being preferred? What happens? And Mr. Afedzie, when you look at our financial market, you'd realize that there are two dominant forces, that's the equity market and the fixed income market. When you look in terms of participation, last year volumes and values traded on the fixed income market, it dropped by more than 50%. And you would ordinarily expect that when volumes and values traded on the fixed income market is dropping, there should be a shift towards the equity market. But you would notice that on that front too, there was a drop in participation. So the question will be, where have people taken this monies to in terms of the financial market? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take your answers.
Thank you very much. I think the problem we have in this country is that meritocracy doesn't work. When I say meritocracy, if you go to those countries like South Korea and all those who came here to learn how to, they believe in not your political inclination. They believe in your ability to deliver. Unfortunately, Bernard will tell you, some of us, we have been ostracated from everything. I mean, this DDEP that you're talking about, every figure that it has been given to a foreign consultant, I have worked it details sector by sector. You can challenge me. And when I traveled recently, they asked me, why are you able to do all these things better? Because I hold a model and understand what the finance minister does. But instead of you looking for me to help me to say, no, this guy, he's too rough, or you're correct. And that is what is killing us. If we can take, not that we don't have good people in this country, but people don't like talking. What I have realized is that people don't want to be blacklisted. But some of us, we've been born like that. I will say it and say it. So meritocracy. And again, our economy needs a serious economic diversification. Let me take you to Ivory Coast. I'm taking you to Ivory Coast. As I say, inflation is 3.6. Yes. If you go to Ivory Coast, currently, it's not only cocoa. It is not coffee. Do you know that when there was this COVID, they used to import, is it palm oil or oil palm? I don't know which is which. Is it palm oil? It used to be imported from Southern Asia. Do you know that? What is it called? It's called Unilever. Unilever is now buying the oil to produce instead from Eastern, buying majority from Ivory Coast. They don't depend on cocoa alone. They don't depend on coffee. They don't depend banana, even banana. I have been there before. Pineapple. It's so diversified. That's the economy. But unfortunately, instead of you creating an enabling environment for the private sector to go in, then you find government creating 1D, 1F, 1BK, 1DK, 1DK. But if you get government gets himself into business, it has never succeeded in anything. So I would prefer that apart from meritocracy, let us create enabling for Ghanaian business people to appreciate it. Let me give you one example. When President Nsafoah came at those of you in university, he said, the hostel, I want to privatize the hostel. Didn't people, if these people haven't built a hostel, where would the Legon people would have been staying? You see, that is how government will create enabling environment, but not to do it. The stock exchange is not functioning. I mean, it's not functioning as it's supposed to be, the pension. Because you see, government seems to be, even when you have tier 3 to be paid for the pension, 3 months later, 1 year later, the money hasn't gone there. I mean, what sort of system is that? So, my brother, we need to use what we call meritocracy, and again, look at our economy and begin to diversify it in such a way that the private sector can get in. And when they do that, there can be a turnaround. That's why they are saying, they've all been saying that the road is what? You said it's going to be turned around. But this one, God is not going to turn it around. God doesn't tell things like that. I believe that as a nation, we should make a conscious effort. My last point, which maybe I won't make any point, a time has come for Ghanaians and the political players over there to put a debt cap in our constitution. The way we borrow, as if the world is coming to an end. And when we borrow and destroy it, it affects children unborn. So for me, I want to leave this message here. So Bernard, be an advocate. I want them to put a debt cap, debt, 60% GDP. When you go there, don't go there again.
All right. We'll be right back. This is the Tesah Investment Dialogue. We will take a short break. When we come back, we'll take answers and closing comments. Stay with us.
Tesah Capital, your gateway to smart investments. For over a decade, we have been your trusted fund manager. Regulated by SEC and registered with the NPRA, we provide investment advisory and fund management services to pension trustees, institutions, and individuals. We bring innovative and research-driven investments to your doorstep. Because at Tesah Capital, you're more than just a client, you're a family. Tesah Capital, grow your wealth.
We're still here as we wrap up the Tesah Investment Dialogue 2024, coming to you live from our studios. There's a final question for Mr. Afedzie on why we are not seeing the equity market rebound, although the fixed income market is not doing well. If you can attempt to address that and give us your closing comments as well.
Okay, that's an interesting question. Normally, that shift happens when you find the debt market not doing well and people move to the equity side. Like I said earlier on, I mean, the equity market went up by 28%. For those who understand, the price-earning ratios are quite low on the market. The key thing is that most investors are so attracted to those high interest rates on the other side of short-term instruments. So we have just a few of them going there. So I talk about pension funds. We are getting some funds moving there now. But what they need is to have more equities on the market. It's too restricted. We need to diversify, especially the various industries they're coming from, etc. 36 is not enough. We need to get about 100 in no time. So that is where the issue is. Most of them are still, the individuals are still going to the tables a shorter term. Those who want to even go into the equity space, because you don't have so many equities on the market, you tend to find that it's a little restricted for them. So going forward, one of the key things is how do we get more companies on the market? Right. How do we get more products on the market? Right. To me, that can be done, first of all, if we get the economy running at the level where we believe it can attract investors. That would be key. So I believe going forward, once we're able to achieve some level of stability in the economy, we're going to see the markets also develop.
Thank you. Because of time,
but I have hope, and I believe it will happen.
I'll take a final comment from Mrs. Eugenia Basheer as we close. What's your closing thoughts for us?
Okay, all right. So, just on the back of what he said, so additionally, you're finding that people are just keeping their money in their bank account. And I keep telling people that then the effect of inflation is eroding the purchasing power of those funds. So you still need to invest. As we are saying, we are cautiously optimistic. As long as the policymakers and government they are going to stick to what they've outlined in the budget, in the way forward. So all things being equal, we are optimistic that we are turning the corner, and if we implement and stick to the things that we have done, then we will do that complete turn of the corner. We've started seeing that in real return on the market. So take the step, invest, continue to invest, but seek advice, because the investment terrain, there's a lot happening. Who are you investing with? You need to make sure they are licensed. What investments are you going into? Does it suit you? The fact that Mr. Afedzie is now talking about stocks does not necessarily mean that it may suit your objective. So that is where you need to speak to an investment advisor. And Bernard, allow me to invite them to contact Tesah Capital. We offer investment advice backed by research. One of our clients said, investment is like Chacha that has gone to Harvard. It means that if you are investing without proper analysis, then it's pure lottery. But if you contact an investment advisor that can give you advice backed by proper research, then you can take the right decision.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Put your hands together for our panelists. We've been listening to Mrs. Eugenia Basheer, she's the MD for Tesah Capital Limited, who gave us a closing thoughts. Dr. Richmond Atuahene, who is a banking and financial consultant. Mr. Ekow Afedzie, former MD of the Ghana Stock Exchange and a lawyer. And of course, our keynote speaker, Professor Nsafoah, Assistant Professor of Economics, Niagara University. Let's put our hands together for all of them. So we also want to say a big thank you to Tesah Capital for convening the Tesah Investment Dialogue on the theme Clarity in the Chaos, What Lies Ahead for the Ghanaian Economy. And how can I say thank you to Gimpa Business School? Awesome audience, great questions, fantastic time. And to the Tesah team and the CT team that put this together. We'll be with you next quarter. It's a quarterly program. We'll come back to you again with another discussion on the Tesah Investment Dialogue. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Tesah Capital, your gateway to smart investments. For over a decade, we have been your trusted fund manager. Regulated by SEC and registered with the NPRA, we provide investment advisory and fund management services to pension trustees, institutions, and individuals. We bring innovative and research-driven investments to your doorstep. Because at Tesah Capital, you're more than just a client. You're family. Tesah Capital. Grow your wealth.